This time around I tried a case-based approach to teaching. So the class is an occupational health class, and the topic is occupational health issues. And instead of a more sort of didactic presentation, I gave them a week ahead of the scheduled class for that topic. I gave them a case to read, a clinical kind of based case. It was a welder who was getting sick from welding fumes. Then they had to answer with questions. So there was a case with questions that they had to answer ahead of time. They got some reading materials around that, so some internet resources, including links to health and safety regulations and WCB, because that was part of the question material. And also I gave them sort of an abbreviated 3 or 4 page kind of maybe 15 slide PowerPoint that really summarized workers' compensation regulations, some welding issues and things. So it was kind of some background information for them. So they had that material ahead of time and the case. And then they were instructed to read the case, read the background material, answer the questions on Blackboard, and then comment on each other's answers. And I wanted the class to have answered and commented by about midweek. The class is on Friday, so I was asking them so by Wednesday to have the questions answered and try to comment on each other's answers. And that worked quite well. It generated a lot of discussion, and they raised some questions themselves about certain issues that came up. There was intentionally some potential for discussion and sort of argument, I guess, one way or the other, built into the questions. And so that did generate good discussion online. They raised some questions that were very interesting and sort of thoughtful online, kind of to me, I guess, indirectly. So I made notes of those questions. I made notes of some of the issues that were discussed, and I came prepared then to remind them this is kind of some of the questions they had and some of the discussions they had, and everyone was comfortable sort of diving right into a discussion about the topic in class because they had discussed it online already. So I kind of used the questions and the issues they brought up as a guide in class to guide the conversation. But really they took the conversation and led it themselves. The main reason I tried this method was because the topic for the week was WCB and OHS regulations, which is spectacularly dry content. So I wanted something a little more involving and interesting, and to generate discussion on something that would typically not be that interesting necessarily, or come across as a little more dry traditionally. I felt it would be a good way to engage them, a good way to get them thinking ahead of time and come prepared to class to discuss, and it just seemed to ultimately make more valuable use of the in-class time, because we could spend time discussing interesting issues that arose out of the information and not the information itself. So I just felt subjectively there was a lot more discussion. The class was much more interactive. They seemed stimulated. They seemed lively, very interested. On the evaluations later, I asked them specifically, and they found it much more interesting and useful, and just allowed them to sort of elaborate and ask questions. It was just very positive feedback. So a concern I had with this approach in the back of my mind is always, are they going to do it? Are they going to actually do this over the week and be prepared? I do have a participation score as a small percentage of my overall mark. So this does, they are aware of that, and I take this in participating in this activity into account when calculating that score. So that's part of it. I mean, there's some motivation in that respect. But I do send out a reminder, and they did participate for the most part. There's always a few students that don't, or forgot, or didn't. But again, there's ways of keeping track on Blackboard. And once one person takes the initiative and answers the questions, then others start to comment. And once people start to comment, then others start to comment on the comments, and especially if someone comments on your answers, then you're obliged to reply. So it kind of snowballed a little bit, and they all started talking amongst each other. So it worked out quite well. There was always a few that don't participate, but there's a way to keep track of that. And for sure, I'm going to use this on the same module from now on every year, and I'm going to incorporate it into at least one other lecture this year, as in 2013, and likely expand it even more into some other classes. So I just felt that it was very useful, and the students liked it, so I'll be using it for sure.